Hi, I'm New Jersey State Senator Diane Allen. It's an unfortunate fact that alcohol and drug abuse continue to plague our society. What most people don't know, however, is the magnitude of the problem among people with disabilities. In this program, we'll explore why that number is so high and what can be done about it. In the next few minutes, we'll meet with experts on the subject and find out who can help answer these questions so we might be better able to understand what can be done to help conquer this silent storm that's affecting so many of our friends, neighbors, and loved ones.
Alcohol and drug problems that go unaddressed are an enormous problem within the disability community. There are some 54 million individuals in the United States with a disability. Approximately 1 out of 5 has a coexisting substance abuse problem.
What often happens is that people's lives with disabilities are channeled into disability agencies and disability services, and very rarely, if ever, do we get into connecting the disability community with the alcohol and drug community. It only seems to ever have a need to come together when an individual ends up in crisis.
People who have disabilities can use their disability to their full advantage. You become con artists, oh, poor me, and we become con artists. And I use that a lot here. I was stopped a couple of times for drunk driving, and I never got a ticket because, oh, poor me, I'm deaf, and I'm sorry, and so they let me go.
What leads to this problem? People with disabilities are just like anyone else when it comes to coping with life's ups and downs, financial issues, job stresses, and relationships, for example. However, they're also dealing with their disability on a day-to-day basis, so you can see why things might sometimes seem overwhelming. Much of society also believes that people with disabilities are entitled to use alcohol or other drugs in order to cope with these stresses. And this belief leads to something called enabling, when others don't attempt to confront alcohol and other drug abuse problems, or when they provide flexible environments which inadvertently encourage substance abuse.
Everybody's focus in my family and in my world, I think, really was in supporting my efforts as a blind person to be part of the norm, the daily routine, the community, the society. And I think that their focus was on my blindness and how my blindness affected my life, work, school, so on and so forth. So if I did drugs and alcohol or had problems with it, rocky lifetimes because of it, that was really overlooked.
A lot of times the problem is that the family member or the counselor feels that the person is entitled to drink. If I had this problem, I would drink too.
Because I still was using alcohol at that time, my mom and dad would still go down to the store and buy me a 6-pack of beer and bring it home and help me drink it.
It may be easy to manipulate our physicians into writing extra prescriptions, or for well-meaning family, friends, and professionals who will be tolerating or sort of overcompensating when their loved one may be using too many medications or mixing the medications with alcohol.
For many people with a disability, the disability itself is a stigma. Alcohol and drug problems in our society, unfortunately, are also still a stigma. So when you ask a person with a disability to address their own alcohol and drug use, or you ask a disability professional to work with their clients around alcohol and drug issues, it's often a difficult request because you're asking for a second, doubly stigmatizing condition to be introduced to the situation.
It's important that substance abuse facilities and providers become aware of their obligation to help all people, and that includes people with disabilities, and just having more of an awareness of disability issues in general.
Most of our communities in this country have wonderful service sectors to help people with alcohol and drug problems. At the same time, disability services are very good in most communities. The problem exists, however, when a person has a condition that exists on both sides of the street. There are very few incentives to use cross-training and cross-disciplinary collaboration between these two sectors, and that's where a real problem exists.
There are some substance abuse prevention, intervention, and treatment programs designed to meet the specific needs of people with disabilities. However, more has to be done. For example, access to existing programs is often limited. And access doesn't just mean widening doors and putting in ramps. The variety of disabilities that exist present a number of barriers that need to be addressed.
The deaf people, we experience various barriers in our attempt to become sober. One of the first problems is in counseling or in a treatment facility, because communication itself is a barrier. Because there's really no one to sign to us.
Most programs are somewhat physically accessible now, so you can get in the front door, but it all depends on how you're met at the door once you're into the building, whether there is enough actual room to move your chair around, the attitude of the people that you're working with, and for them to understand what your needs are as a person with a disability.
Like other entities that are subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, substance abuse facilities have to provide their services in an accessible manner. If they're a government agency or government-funded agency, they have to provide program access to their program services and activities.
Staff training is key to overcoming attitudinal barriers that prevent people with disabilities from receiving equally effective alcohol and drug treatment. That means that counselors must be trained not only how to treat substance abuse, but to develop the skills that will enable them to respond to the unique needs of individuals with disabilities.
We often think of architecturally barrier-free buildings and public accommodations for people who have physical disabilities, but there are a wide variety of changes and modifications and accommodations that can take place in the field of substance abuse treatment so that they can better treat persons with disabilities.
Awareness of the problem of people with coexisting disabilities is increasing. In fact, there's mounting evidence that often substance abuse itself will lead to a disability.
It may not be generally known that substance abuse directly contributes to the incidence of physical disabilities, and that would be specifically spinal cord injuries, traumatic head injuries due to serious car accidents, diving accidents, falls, and so on.
The injury, I don't think, was as much devastation to my kids as my substance use. The fact that I was an alcoholic, I think that had a bigger effect on them also, because I continued my practice for another 7 years of drinking. And during that time, my little 4-year-old became 11-year-old, and my 12-year-old at age 14 was brought over to my apartment and dropped off at the doorstep by his mother with his clothes in a brown bag and said, "Here, you take him, I can't deal with him." And I come to find out why is because he had been using a lot of marijuana, and as it goes on, he taught me how to smoke and I taught him how to drink, so we had a wonderful time together. It was very, very, very difficult on everybody. It really screwed up some lives.
My primary disability back then was my alcohol, and my secondary disability was my deafness. And now I think that's changed, but without the treatment, without working on my continued recovery program as an alcoholic, the deafness would not be a success either.
Fortunately, there is some good news on the horizon. More and more communities and service sectors are beginning to cross-pollinate, and I think that we're about to enter a new age of accessible, accommodating alcohol and drug services for people with disabilities.
If you're a person with a disability and think you may have a substance abuse problem, or know someone else who does, there is help available. There are a number of programs uniquely designed to provide support for both the person seeking help as well as his or her family. There are also programs that will help disabilities counselors and substance abuse counselors learn more about the relationship that exists between disabilities and substance abuse. The organizations that can help are listed at the end of this videotape. Working together, family, friends, and organizations can make a difference.